We analyzed thousands of court records. We have found that evictions happen at a higher rate in the Central Valley than in anywhere else in California. Prior to COVID, this is a snapshot right here of what the crisis looked like even before we had the pandemic. So we had thousands of households that were being evicted annually across the Central Valley. In 2019, when the Central Valley had its lowest level of unemployment since before the Great Recession, this is a snapshot. And just the 5 counties where we organized, there were 12,000 eviction cases that were filed with the courts. And the research shows that there are likely twice as many evictions that happen informally outside of the courts. And so this is the picture of what it looked like before COVID. And what we all know is that COVID has compounded and exacerbated the crisis that we were already experiencing. This right here is a snapshot of unemployment, like initial unemployment claims that were filed. So what you see here is in 2019, this is a picture of what unemployment, like those initial unemployment filings look like. And then March of 2020, when we see, the statewide shelter in place, when we see the closure of businesses and our schools, then we see a spike, right? So beginning, in April, we see nearly over a 600% increase in initial unemployment filings. In September, it peaked to nearly 650,000. And so what we find is that if we don't have strong protections, eviction ordinances and moratoriums to keep our families housed, if we don't have enough rent and mortgage and utility relief to keep families in their home, then we estimate that 100,000 households in the Central Valley are vulnerable to eviction. But let's be clear, these are only households. This is not that one person lives in every one of these households. So at minimum, we're talking about 300,000 individuals or people who in our community, in these 5 counties, who are vulnerable and at risk of being put out of their homes. So in addition to analyzing court records, we spent over 3 months in eviction court observing, systematically documenting what is the process, what happens when a family member or someone shows up to eviction court. It is an eviction mill. Within, literal minutes, the next one, people, decisions being made and people being put out of their homes. So here what we're looking at is in 2019, this is the most active landlord attorney in Fresno County, handled 643 cases, whereas the most active defendant attorney, tenants who had an attorney, handled 6 cases. These are huge disparities. This is when we look at the picture overall. Out of 1,000 court records that we analyzed for Fresno County, and we did this across the board in all of our counties, 73%, that's 730 landlords who had an attorney in eviction court and less than 1% of tenants. This is the norm. The national data shows that 90% of landlords have attorneys in eviction court and less than 10% of tenants do. And in California, we need to urge our California state legislature to extend AB 3088. It's currently AB 15 and AB 16. So those are the 2 policies that we need to be passed before January 31st. We also need more rent, mortgage, and utility relief. We don't want to see our mom and pop landlords who are relying on that income because their pensions have failed them and the cost of living continues to go up and they're being priced out. So they need those homes. It's a source of income. We don't want to see those homes being lost and large portfolios being built up by, corporations like Invitation Homes and the Blackstone Group and Colony. We're trying to track right now to see how many of those folks are coming into the Central Valley and buying up our properties. How many more absentee landlords are we going to see if we don't save our homes right now? And right now, if somebody is served with loses an eviction court, it's a 7-year eviction record. And there's also a 10-year adverse credit component to that. What we found in our data is that tenants are being ordered to pay sometimes as high as 25, a compounded burden effect, which means that if they owe $200, they fell behind in rent and they owe $200, by the time they go through the court process and you add legal fees, you add, court fees, the compounded burden that those families are paying in some cases is 25 points higher than what originally triggered the eviction. So we are calling for an expungement. Why is it that if a family falls short on eviction, they have to be served with a 7 and 10-year sentence that's going to follow them around? It doesn't make any sense. So we're calling for a right to counsel. So that way, every single person who is served with an eviction notice, they have a right to an attorney if they find themselves in eviction court. We're also calling for, at minimum, in 2017, we in California, we passed I think it's called AB 2819. This was the masking law that said, hey, we're going to mask the eviction court cases for a period of 60 days to give the tenants a fair chance to fight their case. And if they win, we're going to keep it masked. Well, when we look at our eviction data, we were, after the Great Recession, a period of 5 years minimum before we started to see the evictions coming down. So what we want to see included in AB 15 and AB 16, in addition to right to counsel, we want to see at minimum a 5-year masking of all eviction cases across the board, across California. And when we come out of this, we want to see changes that take a 7-year eviction record and maybe move it down to 6 months. Why does it have to be 7 years?